tonight is the last discussion group in this series, so we're going to begin with a little bit of meditation. So sit comfortably, your spine erect, relax your body, relax your mind, and right from the beginning, try to have a motivation that I'm going to try to set a very special motivation. For that purpose, I need some concentration and the letting go of the discursive thoughts that are going through my mind. So for the purpose of setting a special motivation, for the benefit of sentient beings, I'm going to watch my breathing, first of all, my respiration. Let go of all other thoughts. Just be the breathing. Breathing, like all compounded phenomena, has a period of arising, period of seeming stability, abidance, and then a period of disintegration, like the exhalation, and a period of vacuity at the end, of being gone, of being ceased, that leaves the space for the next breath. With your mind a little bit quieted, bring your attention further within to your mental consciousness, and not only focusing on the thoughts within it, be aware of them, but refocus instead on the mind itself within which they're arising, as though the space around them, through them, the very nature of the mind, clear light that allows the thoughts to arise, to abide, and to dissipate. use that as a device. By focusing on that, use that as a device to let go of your conceptual thoughts. Whatever arises, turn your attention away from its objective appearance to the subjective nature of the mind that's experiencing it. Vast clarity of the mind, like a vast space, clear light. Let go of the sense of the self. Let go of the sense of the body. They are appearing to your mental consciousness. In the case of the body, through perhaps the tactile sensation, the sense of touch, which you don't have to pay attention to. Instead, focus on the nature of the mental consciousness to which it appears. In the case of the self, the perception of an ego, seeming appearance of the ego, arises to your mental consciousness through having noticed the parts upon which the ego depend, the five aggregates, the body, consciousness, and so forth, feelings. And then, due to beginningless habituation, assenting to the appearance that arises as though there is a self within those parts, arising from its own side. So here, even let go of the sense of the self that's appearing to the mind. Just sense the clear light nature within which it arises. No color, no shape, no materiality. Recognizing that all living beings have exactly the same basic nature of their mind, that they are appearing in different guises to us now. They themselves are experiencing the results of their past virtuous and non-virtuous actions. While within samsara, usually giving rise, whatever appearance appears to our minds, and our mother sentient beings' minds, usually giving rise to afflicted states of mind, attachment and hostility, pride, jealousy, depression, loneliness, all based on this sense of an ego. All of us caught up in this cycle of rebirth again and again from our own side without the help of someone who has escaped from this situation. We're unable to assure ourselves that even in the next life that we won't be experiencing very gross suffering in the lower realms, let alone to escape from cyclic existence, or to avoid the fear of nirvana, the peace of nirvana. The Buddha himself escaped from cyclic existence, attained enlightenment, and through his own power taught the Dharma, not just expounding the words of others. He accumulated an assembly of practitioners around him, the Sangha, those of which realized ultimate truth, the Arya Sangha, along with the Buddha and his teachings, are the refuges, the protections that we can call upon, that we can try to actualize to seek refuge from this suffering. So with a sense of gradual refuge, gradually more subtle sense of refuge, the refuge of seeking protection from suffering of the lower realms, from the suffering of cyclic existence in general, from the fears of the peace of nirvana that would prevent us helping all sentient beings. See if you can generate the mind of refuge through our recollection of the qualities of the Dharma, actually true. Patience, good heart, wisdom. Wisdom of impermanence, wisdom of emptiness. The understanding of the suffering nature of cyclic existence. This is what I can depend upon. This is what I will depend upon. Keeping mindfulness and alertness within our continuum, within our mental continuum. To try to sustain this sense of refuge. I think for the purpose of reviewing the subject of refuge, the doorway into the Buddhist teachings, I'm going to participate in the class tonight with this aim of seeking refuge to escape from the fears of the peace of nirvana, prevent us from self-cherishing thought, that prevent us from working for the welfare of all sentient beings. And then relax, bring your attention back to the present. Excuse me if I still have if I don't have a frog, I have a salamander or something in my throat. Is it is it true that is it some kind of psychosomatic thing when someone else coughs? Someone coughed and I immediately felt I had to cough. It's like when you go outside and you see someone looking up and everyone looks up, whatever it is. I know. Do you notice that in class? Sometimes one person coughs, and then another person coughs, and then the whole room starts coughing at the same time.
It works with yawning.
Yawning works the same way? Yeah. Now, we have just finished, Rinpoche has just finished yesterday, may give us a review of the next class on this section in the Lam Rim Chenmo, the Great Stages of the Path by Lama Tsong Khapa, on the subject of refuge. Incredibly detailed teaching, and something that has carried on from the subject that we've been studying before. Some of us have been studying the middling Lam Rim using this text, but going over it not in as much detail as Rinpoche up till now. And first of all, let me just see if you have any questions, and then we can I can ask you some questions. If you first you ask some questions. Alyssa, you have a question?
Yes, about forsaking refuge, and I'm not clear from the passage regarding that, what actually constitutes forsaking refuge, and what to do about it if one has it. I thought I heard in the translation retaking refuge or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm. Refuge is not something that you just take one time, like the pratimoksha vows. It's something that we, again, take every day, again and again. Not just like in the Bodhisattva practices, we try to generate bodhicitta again and again, and we try to reaffirm the Bodhisattva vows. We can take them again and again. But there's no particular, there aren't the same kind of vows of refuge as there are of the pratimoksha and of the Bodhisattva vows and of Tantra. What we have here are called you could call them trainings, lapcha, that which is to be trained in. The text has translated them as precepts, but sometimes in other, we talk about the 24-hour precepts. Okay, you both yawned and I didn't yawn. I'm good. Okay, I did pretty well there. We talk about the 24-hour precepts, and they sound like those are 24-hour vows. So sometimes the word precept has a slightly different connotation. So these are not exactly vows or trainings, but it's said that in engaging in refuge, the sort of the measure of having refuge is engaging in these trainings, or these precepts, if you want. Lapa means to train. In Sanskrit, I think they call it, remember the text Siksha Samuchaya, Laptu, that Shantideva wrote, the compendium of trainings. Have you heard of that? His Holiness taught in Bodh Gaya a couple of years ago. And so the measure of having refuge, keeping it, is not exactly the same in all the different traditions. As Lama Tsong Khapa points out, from his point of view, there are two main trainings that if you violated or if you gave up, that you would sort of lose refuge. You wouldn't have the benefit of refuge at that time. One of them is the one that you just mentioned, forsaking refuge, even for the sake of your life, thinking that you would give up refuge. And what's the other one? He'd mentioned, I think, in the last class. No, that's part of that one, isn't it? Do you recall? Maybe better look. You have your book with you? You? Pardon? On page 207, I'll read the line that comes after them. I think that if these two do not occur, other contraventions of the of the trainings, the precepts, are just contraventions, but not causes for forsaking refuge, for giving up refuge. So he's saying one gives up refuge or forsakes it or abandons it. What are these two? So he says, however, on the bottom of 206, however, an actual forsaking of refuge means that you have contravened the precept or training not to forsake refuge even for the sake of your life. Similarly, even if you do not forsake the three jewels, if you follow both them and a teacher, teaching and community that are contrary to them, you contravene the precept or the training not to acknowledge other refuges. So for Lama Tsong Khapa, those are the two of the trainings or precepts that were gone over. Remember, there were some general ones and particular ones, things you should do and shouldn't do. What do they call them? Proscriptive and prescriptive. I just prefer what you shouldn't do and what you should do with respect to the Buddha Dharma and Sangha. For instance, with respect to the Buddha, you should revere the Buddha, and also even an image of the Buddha as the actual Buddha himself, and the scriptures and the Sangha and so forth. There are certain things with regard to them that you should do, certain things you shouldn't do. And so you should not, here it says, the precept of acknowledging other refuge which is contrary to the Buddha Dharma and Sangha. So in your own mind, for instance, if you thought, I always use this fellow as an example. What was his name? Tony Robbins? If you thought Tony Robbins, this will really protect you, maybe in some ultimate way, I don't know. Or if you're or a Hindu or Christian or Jewish or Muslim precepts, if you saw them as somehow different than Buddhism, but you were acknowledging them and their community and their teachings as actual refuge, that would contravene your precept of refuge, besides this other one of giving up refuge for even at the sake of your life. So this very, very subtle understanding of refuge. I think really, really, if you've gone this far through the text and you understand these points, Lama Tsong Khapa is saying something quite precise here about what refuge is. Sometimes people ask, is it okay to go to Mass? What do you think? Mass on a Christian, was a Catholic Mass.
Just go to Mass?
Jesse says okay. Okay. What if so what would anyone think? Would that be contravening any of these precepts? Julie, you've got an idea. You're not Catholic, are you?
No. Refuge is the Dharma, and anyone...
Wait, refuge is the Dharma. Wait a second. Refuge is the Dharma? What do you mean refuge is the Dharma?
The true refuge is Dharma.
Okay.
That's what Rinpoche said, right, in the book says. True refuge is Dharma. Buddha is the teacher. True refuge is Dharma.
The actual
and the Sangha
refuge.
is the support.
Right. Uh-huh.
And one word, one syllable of the Dharma should be held sacred. So to me, any syllable presented by any sentient being would be Dharma. Now how you view it or how you take refuge in it might vary depending on your intention.
So, I don't know who, Hitler or Osama bin Laden saying kill, that's the Dharma, you should revere that, and by doing so you're keeping refuge. That's pure refuge.
No, I listen to the word and I hear it, now I measure it against what I know as virtue or non-virtue, and then I can refute it as not being accurate, and I can go back to the Buddha teachings.
Wait, I'm not sure exactly what the question I was asking. Let's go back to what the question I was asking. We can see it. We can fine tune what you were saying. What do you think? People ask, if I go to church or Mass, usually because on Carrie's Catholic, isn't she, Georgie? Yeah, but I mean, she was born Catholic.
Her parents are Catholic.
O'Brien or something like that.
Yeah,
Irish Catholic. So maybe you'd like to go to Christmas. What is it? Christmas Mass, or what's it called? New Year's Mass, or what's the best one? New Year. Was it? Christmas Eve Mass is the big one, right? So, and the other Irish and people that we have in the class here. So is that contravening your precept of refuge?
Just going to the Mass?
Well, it depends on, why would you be going? You must be doing, it's not, I mean, if you're just going for a social, it's like going to the discotheque or something, maybe that wouldn't be contravening your...
No, but if you went for, some of them...
You don't see my point, what I'm saying?
I think your question begs other questions. I think, if you're going there to...
I'm a beggar anyway.
If you're going there, okay, if I was going to, say, Christmas Eve Mass with some friends, to me it would be more of a social issue.
Okay, social issue we'll leave out.
Okay.
Say a person is going for some kind of religious reason, right?
Then he probably would be a Buddhist.
Well, I went to Mass, and I'm not Catholic, but I went last year with my mother-in-law, and I did it as a Buddhist. And
Well, that's what
experienced it
we're
in that
trying
way.
to... You say you went as a Buddhist, but we're trying to determine whether you were an actual Buddhist if you went... What do you think, Midian?
I think if you
Okay, well, that's enough. Okay.
if you go to the church with the intention in your heart, somehow you're seeing this priest as a teacher of refuge. If you're seeing the God of the Catholic Church as an ultimate refuge, and if you're taking communion, which usually is symbolic of an acceptance of all things as some sort of refuge, if you're seeing all that at the church, then that would be contravening your Buddhist refuge.
What would depend, I think, on your understanding of what the teachings of Christianity are. Say, for instance, if you had really analyzed it and in your own mind thought, from a Buddhist perspective, Christ was actually a bodhisattva, and everything he taught, you tried to understand from a Buddhist point of view, even things that the Christians understood a different way. If he said, I am the Son of God, you understood him to be saying, I am the victor's son, the son of the conquerors, an epithet of the bodhisattvas and so forth. And you went and you saw his actions, giving his life for sentient beings as the action of a great bodhisattva. I think you would be completely not contravening refuge. You'd have perfect refuge. But if you saw the teachings of Christ as something different, a different path, that there was a God. At this point, you're sort of kind of half and half. Well, sometimes I watch karma, sometimes I pray to God, and you go and at that point your mind switches over, and you're thinking, please God, protect me. I've been bad. I've been going to these Buddhist things or whatever. That would be. Even if you didn't think like that, even if you didn't think, forgive me because I'm going to the Buddhist things, but if you saw it as somehow a different path, that would definitely be forsaking refuge. And
Be accepting another path, right?
yeah, because it's here, as Lama Tsong Khapa says, that the very sensitive one, not just necessarily giving up the refuge of Buddhism, you might think you have that, but to accept a teacher, a teaching, and community that are contrary to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So if the teachings of the Old Testament saying that you should kill these villagers because they did this or that, or they made heathen images. Have you read in the Old Testament? Okay.
Gautama said that the argument of the existence of God didn't benefit anybody's understanding of the nature of mind. Whether God truly exists or not is completely beside the fact of the Dharma. I think Gautama said that.
He didn't. He remained silent about various questions where people had preconceived ideas. Like if they said, what happens to the Buddha, the Tathagata, when he dies? Does he exist or does he not exist? Does he both exist and not exist, or does he neither exist or not exist? Different things like this. And the Buddha just remained noble silence. So sometimes people thought that implied that he didn't know an answer. And other questions, the Buddha, discouraged intellectual curiosity about things that would take you off the actual path. So it might be in some contexts when people talked about cosmology and other things. The Buddhists, when the people asked questions, the Buddha said, if it is conducive to liberation and enlightenment, then that's what the Buddha teaches. But the Buddha does not teach that which is not conducive to the practice and to the attainment of liberation and enlightenment. So it could be in some circumstances, philosophical investigation about some of these things might fall into that category. But from a Buddhist perspective, when we analyze whether there is a creator God that's different, that actually has created our world and a soul, from a Buddhist perspective, that would be very contradictory to Buddhist understanding, the Dharma. And say, for instance, if you were to take communion, I don't know, I'm not a Catholic, so I don't know. If you were to take communion, it's an interesting question. Dorji, you're not Catholic, are you? No, okay. Jason Greenberg, no, I don't think so.
My mom is Irish Catholic. My dad is Jewish.
Was Jewish. Okay, was Jewish. Okay. So.
I don't think he's even sure.
He's not sure. So did you ever take communion? Did you ever go with your mom to?
I think I did.
Okay.
Maybe a very long time ago.
Okay.
I remember going to some.
You're not sure if it was
really not liking it, but that's
the
all.
biscuits and the wine or whatever. Okay.
Maybe.
Okay. So.
That's Catholic light.
Okay. So if there's a certain solemnity and importance given to certain rituals in different religions. Also in Hindu religion, when you receive the blessed substances on your forehead or some other kind of thing, if you think at a point like that is actually something that will protect you, and you haven't differentiated well in your mind, you haven't analyzed well, and there's a part of your mind that thinks it's something different, this is something that the Dharma doesn't doesn't provide me, I think that would be contravening. This is my own point of view. If you've analyzed well and you think, this receiving of communion is almost like the Buddhist soak, and see it in emptiness, the tantric ritual. Maybe that would be enhancing your refuge. Again, if you understood all of Christ's teachings as teaching about bodhicitta, and if someone were to hit you on one cheek, you should even offer them the other rather than retaliating. Many Tibetan Lamas who hear the story of Christ say that they think either he was great bodhisattva or an emanation of Buddha, from his teachings. It's hard to see anything that Christ said that really contravened the teachings. Even his wrathful action of overturning the money, what do they call it, money lenders or money changers' tables. Sometimes the bodhisattvas act in wrathful ways to prevent kind of bad behavior and so forth. So it's very difficult to see. But some of the other teachings of the Old Testament seem, on the surface, to very difficult, if interpreted in a general way, very difficult to, align with Buddhism. So I think if you're going to go to, any kinds of religious ceremonies, if you think you're getting something, if you think you're getting something that Buddhism doesn't offer, then that might be contravening your refuge.
Well, also my mind was going to the place that, at least I was raised a Christian as well, a Lutheran, and I think as a Buddhist going into a service like that, the danger would be in following the service, spoken words,
Mhm.
prayers, and things like this.
Mhm.
There's all these little subtleties woven into those, that could contravene what we would call Buddhist refuge.
Mhm.
And even when I transitioned out of Christianity into Buddhism, in that space, that void in between where I wasn't sure what I was,
Mhm.
I actually would go to a service because my grandmother was Catholic, and I just enjoyed going to churches, but I would not participate verbally, and I would not do any recitations because I felt it was almost like lying because my heart wasn't in it. So therefore, if I could not do it wholeheartedly, something would be askew, and there was something disrespectful to me about that.
Yeah.
And my pastor told us communion for us was a really big deal. We had to go to classes, and then you have the day where you're initiated to become a confirmed member.
Mhm.
So he said that you do not come to communion if you don't have the mind of viewing Christ as your teacher.
Mhm.
And if you don't have that mind, you just don't do it. Otherwise, then there's something disrespectful. He used some words that I don't remember.
Yeah. So I think in the same context, if you analyze and you think all of Christ's teachings were the teachings of a bodhisattva for those particular group of people, manifesting and even using terminology that had different meaning. Like there's stories of Christ having gone to Ladakh. Whether that's true or not, it's hard to say. And the missing years between 13 and 30 something, 33, 12 to 30. So whether that's actually true or not is a little bit debatable, but it's sort of an interesting kind of concept, because one of the statements that he said that was even more heretical to the Jewish priests, or what would they be called, the Jewish rabbis, the Pharisees, was that he was the Son of God, not just that he was the Messiah. Pardon?
Actually, it's the Sadducees were
Sadducees.
they were the priests in control of the beginning.
So as I understand it, many of you are much more learned in this, or much more learned in this. I'm not learned in this at all. But my meager understanding is that in the prophecies of the Messiah, the Savior that would be coming, or even prophets, there was never any terminology that they would be called the Son of God. That was considered blasphemous, that one would be of the same nature of God. The prophets were always of a lesser nature. So Christ's statement that he was the Son of God was considered even more presumptuous and, pointing himself out as a prophet. Whereas in the Mahayana tradition, as we said before, one of the epithets of the bodhisattvas is to refer to oneself as the son of the Buddha, the son of the conqueror. Or you could say the son of God, if you considered Buddha God. That this is something that you can attain, Buddhahood. And once you develop bodhicitta, you are considered an offspring, a son or offspring of the Buddha that will eventually achieve that state when you mature. So that's kind of an interesting. If you see Christ in some way like this, not necessarily what I'm proposing, but if you see the teachings of Christ is in no way contradictory, then I think you wouldn't contravene your refuge. But if you go to the Christian ceremonies and you think you're getting, this is just the way I'm putting it, if you think you're getting something that you wouldn't get in Buddhism at all, that might be contravening. If you think that you're getting something that helps your Buddhism, it's just like you go to a Zen temple or a Thai temple, and it's just the different ambience or the way of saying things that enhances your mind. I don't think that would be contravening your refuge. If you went to the communion or whatever, and it was just a feeling of being close to Buddha and Dharma and Sangha, great bodhisattva, I don't think that would be contravening. Frank? You know?
I was going to
Say, when I learned that the Buddha taught the Dharma in different ways for people of different capacities, the Mahayana and the Hinayana, and that there are statements that are contradictory there, an understanding that's suitable for people of a lesser mind might contain statements that aren't strictly true from the higher point of view. Mm-hmm. I've always thought of other religions in a similar fashion, that there's no reason Buddha and Bodhisattvas can't manifest as rabbis and priests and other in other form, Hindus, because those people perhaps aren't ready to accept, reincarnation, aren't ready to accept certain of the truths of Buddhism. So he teaches it, morality and so forth in a lesser way to beings of those capacities.
Right.
Is there any problem with thinking about
I think that's right. I think you're right. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says we shouldn't, is not just his own teaching, but you find in other Buddhist teachings also, you should not criticize the founders of any religions because the Buddhas themselves do manifest in these ways, just as you say, out of skillful means to lead people of different mindsets. Even if you look at it this way also, our understanding of Buddhism may not actually be very, very precise or well understood. So what we conceive of the Buddhist path that we're supposedly practicing, the way that we practice may even be less dharmic than the way a Christian might be practicing their path. So, based on different kinds of philosophical view that God created us in His image and so forth. But if you're seeking refuge, from a Buddhist perspective, and you've decided you're going to, this is the point, if you're decided you're going to really rely on the Buddhist path because it's something that leads not just to heaven in the next lifetime, not just as something even that leads to liberation out of cyclic existence, but that can lead to the benefit of all sentient beings into a state of enlightenment, then if you're taking refuge in that way, then it's good to reevaluate to these other, the teachings that you may have encountered before, the Sufis or whatever else. If you think that you're getting something from them that is not found in Buddhism, that might be accepting a teacher or a community or a teaching that's contrary to Buddhism. Okay, Dorji? Yeah.
I might be wrong. I seem to recall hearing something in the teachings Rinpoche has been giving, maybe his last week, about, maybe I picked this up wrong, that other religions are faulty and that Buddhism's the only true path or something like that. Was it something like that, or was I hallucinating?
I think you might have heard something like that. But of course, every religion in the world says that, right? So what you have to do is you have to check up. You from the beginning, if you're just a young person who didn't have necessarily strong instincts in any one path, and someone says, the Hindu path is the perfect path, and someone says, no, that's not the Sufi path, and someone says, no, not the Sufi path, it's the the Rosicrucians, Rosicrucians. Who's it in the Sikhs? The Sikh path. It's the actual, it's not Christianity, it's not Islam, it's the Sikh path. They're seeking, or Islam, and so at first, before you know anything and before you've actually investigated, how are you to know? It's just everyone claiming that this is a reason why people would, maybe give up in entering into any path, because all these people are arguing, ours is the best, So, but if you actually investigate, from like when you study, this is one of the things that those who have studied Lama Tsong Khapa's teachings have found so perfect explanation, so satisfying to the mind, the worldview, on one sense, let's say satisfying. Like His Holiness says, you're a Christian, he says to his Christian friends, I'm Buddhist. God is your problem. Karma is mine. When asked by these paparazzi, how was his relationship with the Archbishop of Canterbury or something, and isn't Christianity different than Buddhism? And he said, God is your problem. karma is mine. So it's just, he said that from one point of view, our world view, our cosmological view that fits some people. For some, it's an atheistic view. Some don't have any particular kind of philosophical leanings. Some everything seems to make sense in terms of a creator God, and soul being created, and our sins being punished and so forth by a creator God. For others, the Buddhist path seems to be all-encompassing. If you investigate, the Buddhists who have investigated these various paths seem to feel, and I feel myself a Buddhist, that this is a path that is itself always good in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. That's one of the things that is mentioned, that it talks about, it never talks about methods that bring about harm, even temporarily, upon oneself, ascetic practices that have no particular benefit. It does have ascetic practices, but from a very particular point of view. It's not like that. Remember when Rinpoche was talking about the various kinds of practices that people did that didn't have any end result, that just caused suffering to them, that it leads to happiness and the benefit of others, and has all of these great qualities. So the more that you understand that path and you investigate other paths and you see the difference between Buddhism and those paths, at least as they're explained by various people. For instance, you might think that Christ was actually teaching the Buddhist path, but he couldn't say everything in detail in that short amount of time, right? So if you understand, if that's what you understand, then there's no contradiction. But if you understand, as other people interpreted his words and and in combination with the Old Testament, if you understand this is contrary to the Buddhist teachings, then you would start to see them as faulty. They don't have the same benefit of the Buddhist path. So from that particular point of view, from a Buddhist perspective, the Buddhist path of developing wisdom of emptiness you don't find in any other religion. Even in the Advaita, Vedanta tradition, non-dualistic, even within some Hindu kind of traditions, that the understanding of emptiness, or what they call non-duality, is not exactly the same. You don't find the same meaning of bodhicitta and the bodhisattva's activities, or working lifetime after lifetime, having that aspiration. You don't even find that in Christianity, although something close. So if you analyze all these different parts, you start to see these other paths as faulty compared to that. So this is in one sense, gives one a greater feeling of fortune to meet the Buddhist path with this particular lifetime. Okay.
One small thing that I think Buddhism also has in its favors, or at least for me, the Dalai Lama, was he embraced Western cosmology, the physical sciences, where there was contradiction with. He was willing to say, well, the evidence is there, as far as that ability to be open to data or to phenomena, and investigate it and verify it, and be willing to say, hey, we didn't get that part right. Mm-hmm. That's something you don't see very often in other religions.
Yeah, actually, the Abhidharma that talks about this Buddhist cosmology is something that even in the lower tenets, even in the Sautrantika, even they are dubious whether this Buddha actually taught these things, because as we were saying before, some of these things, when Buddha was asked about the universe and different things, the Buddha said, if it's conducive to enlightenment and liberation, I teach it, otherwise I don't. So those individuals who hold on to that sort of worldview too tenaciously, His Holiness kind of teases. He says, you just have to, these, the Tibetan geshes or scholars or something that still hold on that the world is flat or something. He says he just wants to buy them an air ticket to take them up in an airplane to see the curvature of the earth, Anyway, let's get back to the chapter on refuge. Anyone else have any questions on this chapter? Yeah, Louise.
Actually, I wish I had this question in context, but I don't remember exactly where it came from. But Venerable Choden Rinpoche said something about undeveloped, fully ordained monks. And what is the undeveloped part of that?
Oh, is this when we're talking about the four months?
I'm not sure if that's what
Was it when he was talking about what constitutes a Sangha jewel? It could be one Arya being or four fully ordained monks, even if they're undeveloped monks.
I'm not sure what undeveloped meant, and if you could remember the concept, the context, but there were various points when we were talking about the Sangha. Yeah, usually 4 fully ordained monks constitute a representation of the Sangha, and it's said that the Sangha itself, as a group, has the same karmic efficacy in terms of offering or in terms of perhaps creating negative karma with respect to them, like stealing or abusing, the same as helping or harming an Arya being who's an actual Sangha. Usually the word Sangha, do you know what the word Sangha means in Sanskrit? Do you know, Median? Mm-hmm. Kind of, it has the sense of group, yeah. So to call one individual Sangha sounds like it should be a group of people, but it has the sense of an Arya Sangha. An Arya being is the actual Sangha, the actual community, a member of the actual community. Just one Arya being is a member of the Sangha, whereas 4 or more monks have that same capacity karmically because they can pass on the ordination, which is the basis of morality. So even if they're undeveloped in terms of realization of emptiness, if they have the vows and so forth, then they're capable of taking part in the ceremony that perpetuates the Vinaya. Like that. Okay. So, am I going to ask some questions? Okay. Oh, good, Leo. That's a question.
Do you know when? Do you have any inside information as to when Volume 2 of this?
It just came out.
Just did it really? Yes. Thank you.
Volume 2 just came out. Do we have it in the store? Cool. Excellent. Okay.
One more question.
Oh yeah. What's that?
Under the benefits of, does he appear in personal instructions? I seem to be...
Where'd you have there?
At 203. Down at the bottom of 203. The benefits as they appear in personal instructions. I've noticed that this comes from either from the quick path, short path, or instruction, or oral instructions from the lineage lamas. I'm confused. Are those the same?
Yeah, I remember hearing that at one point. So who could, Venerable Pemo, do you have any way of completely demolishing the assertion that when this text where it says those in the benefits as they appear in the personal instructions, that the personal instructions referred to here is a text called the quick path? Do you have any way to demolish that assertion? No? You're keeping silence? Oh, okay. Okay.
She's on this one, though.
On this one. Okay, who wrote the quick path? They're 2 different pension lamas or 2 different Dalai lamas? You sure? Okay.
Yeah, because it's one of the 8 main Lam Rim texts, and
Uh-huh.
the 2 books by the Dalai. Like the 3rd Dalai Lama was The Essence of Refined Gold, and the 5th Dalai Lama was Manjushri's own words. So this one is, I thought, by one of the Panchen Lamas.
Okay, so these 2 texts, they were written before the Lama Tsong Khapa or after Lama Tsong Khapa? After Lama Tsong Khapa. So how could he, pardon? So he knew what, so either Yeshe Getso had gotten it wrong, or, either he misunderstood what Rinpoche said completely, or Rinpoche mentioned those texts that they explained it in more detail or something, but he wouldn't be quoting those texts because they came after him. Do you follow what I mean? Like one of the texts that's attributed to Nagarjuna, supposedly one of the commentaries to his own treatise on wisdom, quotes his disciple Aryadeva in that commentary. So the Tibetans, Lama Tsong Khapa and others, use that and other factors, not only that, but other logical things within it, to show that this text could not have been written by Nagarjuna himself, because he would not have been quoting his own disciple. So this is something you could see there. So this, I think, either Yeshe Getso misunderstood, or there completely, that Rinpoche didn't even mention those texts, or some other words that sounded like that, or if he did mention those texts, it was in some other way, that it wasn't that as they appear in the personal instructions. The personal instructions means the instructions of the lineage lamas, I think, as he said on another day, yeah. Okay. Thea, did you have a question? No? Okay, so let's take a look at the outlines again and see if we can sort of put things together here. So the chapter, we've gone through 2 chapters here, going for refuge to the 3 jewels, and the precepts or the trainings of refuge. And the chapter 11, which is page 177, starts, relying on the means for achieving happiness in the next life. What came right immediately preceding that in terms of outlines? This is relying on the means for achieving happiness in the next life. What would have come right before that, do you remember? Relying on the means for achieving happiness in the next life.
It's contemplating what will occur in your future life. It's accepting the 2 types of things.
Contemplating what will occur, is that right? Where do you see that?
What will occur in the outline for chapter 10, page 161.
So that's not the same one, right? Because that's B, and this is 2. So you're looking for a small. Okay.
It's developing a state of mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives.
Okay. So developing a mind that strives diligently, and what are the outlines of that?
The main things are death, accepting
Okay, so even coming before that was exhorting one to take advantage of this life of leisure and endowment, right? That came before that. And having been exhorted, having been interested to take advantage, then the outline is, what did you just say? The first outline? Yeah.
Developing a state of mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives.
That has the number 1? Yeah. And what's that the outline of? What's the outline above that?
The actual training of thought for a person of small capacity.
Okay, so this is the actual training of thought of the person of small capacity. Has first contemplating, developing,
A state of mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives.
and that has to do with understanding death and impermanence and the suffering of the lower realms. Now, having developed that, relying on the means for achieving happiness in the next life. This is the actual means. Part of it is refuge, and part of it is what? Observing karma, which will be the next chapter. So let's take a little break And then we'll go into the nitty-gritty of the outlines, so you might check your outlines during the break time. Anyone, as we're talking about this subject, it's very, very useful. You might wonder, why is this guy George always talking about these outlines? It seems like not so interesting. If you understand the outlines, if you've memorized the outlines, you can, in a sense, recreate much of the teachings. It's like the root texts. You know, in the monasteries, they would study the root texts. Maybe at Kopan, you remember the boys studying the condensed verses of various texts. And later, when they receive commentary on that and they understand the meaning, having those words in mind, they can reconstruct the teachings. They have a way of recalling them very easily because they've understood a condensation, kind of like the meaning of dharani, something that holds a meaning, like a mantra that's a condensed meaning of something. So when you're doing meditation on the Lam Rim, Tupen Pemo, you have experience. When you do Lam Rim meditation, Lam Rim retreat, if you know the outlines, you can actually, how to progress on the meditation. As Lama Tsong Khapa mentioned in the Lam Rim Chenmo and many different contexts, proper meditation is not one that you just let your mind go anywhere. Just let it do anything. I'll think about this. And then something else comes up, and I'll think about that, and just going to get spaced out and how beautiful everything is, or that may not be so constructive. It might be, I don't know, it might be constructive for some people who don't have any beauty in their lives, but that's not general meaning of meditation. So this section on refuge is involved with the outline that says, relying on the means for achieving happiness in the next life. And its first outline is training and going for refuge, the excellent door for entering the teachings. And the chapter that we're just about to begin on karma, or Rinpoche did begin, is the second outline of that. First one was training and going for refuge, the excellent door for entering the teachings. And chapter 14 is reflecting on the distinctions amongst the varieties of karma. Okay, so training in going for refuge, the excellent door for entering the teaching.
I think wouldn't it be 13, which is B with one little, and then chapter 14 is B with a double.
Is 14's got a double? Yeah. Okay, I didn't see that. Oh yeah, you may be right. Yeah. So where's the single B?
The single B is under chapter 13, developing the faith of conviction that is the root of all temporary happiness and certain goodness.
Oh, I've skipped 13. Did I skip 13?
Yeah.
Oh no, that's the one I'm talking about.
Is that it?
Did I say 14?
We always
Developing the
say
faith.
13.
Yeah, I said 14. That was the varieties of karma. Right. I was thinking that was the beginning. Right.
You were just testing us to make sure we were watching.
Very good. Very good. Developing faith of conviction that is the root of all temporary happiness and certain goodness. The faith of conviction. Okay. Very good. So you're right, chapter 13 on page, 209, I guess. Very good. So relying on the means for achieving happiness in the next lifetime has these two outlines, training and going for refuge, and developing faith of conviction. Does it have a third outline? So this has the developing faith and conviction that is the root of all temporal happiness and goodness, that will have outlines that we're going to talk about later. So we've talked about going for refuge, the excellent door for entering the teachings. Remember Rinpoche mentioning that this idea of refuge being like a doorway or a gateway? So sometimes I think the same word is used. So we talk about the gateway or the doorway to entering the the Buddhist teachings, entering the teachings, the doctrine, is refuge. That's kind of like the demarcation, what you have to enter in to get into the teachings, going for refuge. How about what's the doorway to the Hinayana path? Do you know, Venerable? Venerable Pamela, do you know? Okay, all of these years of training have paid off. Renunciation. Spontaneous renunciation. You look so serious, Pamela. You okay? Yeah, yeah, that's unusual. Usually you have a cold or something? Oh, okay. That's the reason. It's cold in here. She hasn't developed perfect renunciation yet, but I'm just teasing. So, right, the doorway to entering the Hinayana path is not merely renunciation. It's the development of spontaneous renunciation. Not just an intellectual renunciation that you have sometimes and other times you don't, but actual heartfelt, spontaneous, natural renunciation that has been developed through study and meditation that sees all of the marvels of cyclic existence as the nature of suffering, as being unsatisfactory on one side, and that's striving for enlightenment, striving for liberation on the other side, like two sides of a coin. Remember we talked about the striving for liberation, this Tibetan name Tardo. Maybe you know Geshe Tardo. And so that's the doorway to the Hinayana path. Entering into the path. If you're actually on the Hinayana path, you have spontaneous renunciation. How about the Mahayana path? What's the doorway to the Mahayana path? Do you know, Jesse?
Or Bill? Was it Bill?
I think it's the motivation to liberate your fellow beings, to bring them to enlightenment.
Now, would that be...
But I don't...
Okay, would that be right? That's pretty close. What do you think, Leo? Would that be... Is that what Bill said? Is that bodhicitta? The motivation to liberate all your fellow sentient beings? Set them in enlightenment? Is that bodhicitta?
To achieve liberation for their sake.
No, he said the motivation to liberate all your fellow sentient beings, set them in enlightenment. Is that bodhicitta? I think so. That's good enough. What do you think, Don? You can try. What do you think, Don? Is that bodhicitta?
Did you ask me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think it's to achieve, to be able to achieve Buddhahood in order to liberate all sentient.
Right. It's part of it. It is motivated out of a concern to bring about the benefit of sentient beings, recognizing in our present state we can't do it. Even as we train in worldly things, and the mundane path, the only way to do that is not only to attain liberation, but to attain omniscience, so that you can bring that about. So bodhicitta, the doorway to the Mahayana path, is a thought that thinks, I must attain enlightenment in order to set all living, all my fellow sentient beings in the state of enlightenment. That would be the doorway to the Mahayana. Otherwise, if you're born to a Mahayana family, as I often tease the people in Singapore. Are there any Chinese? There's no Chinese people here. You're Chinese? I thought so. Often tease the Chinese in Singapore that just having your identity card that says you're Buddhist, it doesn't make you, or you're Mahayana Buddhist, doesn't make you a Mahayana Buddhist. You could be Mahayana Buddhist by tenet, perhaps, by your philosophical inclination, but to have entered the Mahayana path, to actually be a Mahayanist, you have to have this mind. So as much as we might admire the Mahayana path, we're just kind of in my case anyway, maybe some of you or all of you are bodhisattvas. I'm kind of if I admire the bodhisattva path, the most we might say is that we're proto-bodhisattvas. We'd like to be. We're not yet bodhisattvas. Even if we develop bodhicitta with effort, we're not actual, fully qualified bodhisattvas who've entered into the Mahayana path. Maybe in a certain labeling, in some context, you can call yourself a bodhisattva, but not yet a bodhisattva. Even if it's on your identity card, or on your bracelet on your wrist, or yes.
I read, and this is a quote. This is hearsay. This was someone quoting His Holiness. This isn't a quote I read from His Holiness, but they said that they had talked to him, and he said that he had only achieved a pure state of bodhicitta a few times. Okay, and I was curious, not in that statement itself, but the attaining of bodhicitta, or that realization. Is there something you can say about that, or what it?
Well, it's between the two, realization of emptiness and the actual attainment of spontaneous bodhicitta. The spontaneous achievement of bodhicitta is much more difficult to achieve, although it's much easier to understand because it's a conventional truth. If someone explains to you what bodhicitta is, you can conceive of that quite easily. It makes sense. And you can kind of aim for that and maybe have some feeling that you might engender that feeling. But to actually have bodhicitta, to actually have generated bodhicitta in your mind is not an easy thing. It's said to be very, very difficult to do. Requires a great accumulation of merit. On the other hand, the realization of emptiness seems to many of us at the beginnings, because we don't receive much instruction at first, because mainly we receive instruction about conventional reality. At first, the wisdom that realizes emptiness sounds like something far distant and very, very difficult, but it is said that in any one lifetime, a person of sharp faculties can actually realize emptiness. A person of sharp faculties, mainly the faculty of wisdom, they have sharp wisdom, can realize emptiness, not directly necessarily, but some insight into emptiness more rapidly than developing bodhicitta. They can actually have an insight, a realization of emptiness in this lifetime, and on the basis of that, then they can engage in the very powerful method to develop bodhicitta called the equalizing and exchanging of self and others. That involves one of the things that enhances that is the understanding of emptiness, that there is no inherently existent self, and so forth, and many different ramifications of that, many different implications of that. So I think His Holiness always is very, very humble in giving an example to ourselves. He never says, I am a bodhisattva, or I have realized this, or I have realized that. It's said especially in the Gelugpa tradition that we are fortunate to study, that was founded by Lama Tsong Khapa, that there's a lot of emphasis on not showing, even if you have some realization, not demonstrating that, not showing that or claiming that, partially because of the vows of the monks and nuns. One of the very sensitive vows is not to speak a big lie, the great lie, to say that you have powers, psychic powers, or other kind of realizations that you don't have. And even a subsidiary vow, even to say that you have powers you do have, is not even a lie, right? Without benefiting sentient beings. So His Holiness and Lama Tsong Khapa emphasized that if you have qualities, you shouldn't put them out in front for others to see. This is what a lot of us want to do. We want others to know, how good we are, or whatever. You got that, Drew? Yeah. These are qualities. This is Frank's Indian bell that he offered to us. So you shouldn't keep up there. You should keep under the bushel. Keep in your heart your qualities, and it's as though out through your pores, others who search will recognize your qualities. But putting your qualities outside becomes a big hindrance for yourself. It's a cause of other people's jealousy and doubt as you make claims, and then your own pride and your own worry that others might be surpassing you, and so forth and so on. So it's better to be humble in that regard. So His Holiness takes, is a perfect example of that. He just says, I'm the simple monk Tenzin Gyatso. doesn't, even asked if he has realizations. Generally, he says he doesn't have any realizations. And if you hear him talking, when he spoke in Florida recently, if you downloaded from lamrim.com, you could download. When His Holiness teaches nowadays, often you can receive the teachings almost within hours by going to the internet and to lamrim.com and downloading the files and listening to them. His Holiness was saying, some people think I'm a god. That's ridiculous. I'm a Buddha. Some people say I'm a Buddha. That's ridiculous. And just because that can be the cause of so much jealousy or misconception, someone's saying, claiming that they're perfect, doesn't mean that he's not an enlightened being. For him to say that, do you think he's lying? If he were to say that, he's actually Buddha, but he says he's not Buddha. What do you think? Is that a lie? That's heavy. Maybe he's broken his Buddhist vows by saying he's. Yeah. Is that lying? What do you think?
Well, if he knew he was, that would probably be a lie.
It's okay.
Oh, you mean if he didn't know he was, it wouldn't be a lie. He was a Buddha, he didn't know it, and he said he wasn't a Buddha. What do you think? What do you think? Is that a lie?
I think it's okay to lie. It might be a lie, but it's okay to lie for the benefit of sentient beings.
Lying has the implication of wishing to deceive sentient beings, wishing to deceive others for your own benefit. So it may not actually be a lie at all, even if he is Buddha, to say that he's not a Buddha. Anyway, you have to think about that. Were you going to say something?
Would that be actually? Could it also be viewed as a statement of great compassion? I mean, if he's said to be an emanation of Chenrezig, then he would put everyone else as more important than himself. So therefore, he would make a statement: "I am just a simple monk."
Mm-hmm. Certainly the Buddha has no fault, so you can't say that the Buddha would, it's not like a bodhisattva that has a precept that they have to engage in activities, negative actions of body and speech for the benefit of sentient beings. So they have to, if it benefits sentient beings, they have to lie, even knowing that there'll be some karmic consequences. Buddha's beyond that. So you have to analyze what that means in that case. The Buddha's... If Dalai Lama is actually Buddha, it's for him to say something like that has great meaning, that people can misinterpret, and it can be ruinous to them and so forth, and to Buddhism in general. He is spontaneously acting. It's not an actual lie. But yes.
Let me clarify what I said before. I believe that when he says, "Of course I'm not Buddha," I believe that he believes that. That's what I mean. So
Okay, I don't think that he believes that.
So you believe that?
I believe that he knows he's a Buddha. If someone is a Buddha and they didn't know it, that would be like kind of like a faulty kind of omniscience. Knows all he's a Buddha, knows all phenomena, like seeing this transparent fruit in the palm of your hand, see inside, outside, everything, but not knowing that you're a Buddha. That would be, it's like in the misinterpretation in the Tathagata Garbha Sutras and the Uttara Tantra that says that we are all Buddhas, but we haven't realized it yet. Remember you were mentioning something related to that at the break. That doesn't, from a Buddhist perspective, if you analyze that, it does not mean the definitive meaning. That has to be interpreted. That is an interpretative statement that the Buddha made. It doesn't mean that we are actually Buddhas and we don't realize it. It means that we all have the potential of becoming Buddhas, and that in realizing that potential, we do become Buddhas. But if we were already Buddha, and we didn't know it, that would be like a great criticism of the omniscient state.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
What I'm saying is, I think.
I'm happy. Okay. Good. Thanks. This is going from. Okay. Good. I agree. Okay. Okay, so let's look here. So relying on the means of achieving happiness in the next life. The first outline was training and going for refuge, the excellent door for entering the teachings. So refuge is the door of entering the teachings. So this has several outlines. The causes of going for refuge, then based on those causes, the objects to which you go for refuge, and, right, page 178, sorry, and 3, the way you go for refuge. The way one goes for refuge. So this kind of covers that 11th chapter, and then the 12th chapter is talking about the fourth outline is the, once you've gone for refuge, the stages of the trainings of that which is to be trained in, the lapcha, which they translate as precepts. Almost sounds like vows, but it means the trainings of refuge. So what are the causes of refuge? Who can I ask? Median, do you know the causes of refuge?
Fear of suffering is one of them, and another, the second cause that's been mentioned frequently is the desire to free other sentient beings from suffering. So some more compassionate motive.
Okay, is that right?
Fear of one's own suffering, and then secondarily, maybe a more elevated motivation is desire to free others from suffering. No?
Right. What is it? Faith. In English, in common American now, 2 F's, fear and faith. I mean, we can say preoccupation and, I mean, if you find some word that means faith, it starts with P. So, the first, without a sense of some preoccupation or fear or, what's another word for, sense of foreboding about the future, you're not going to seek real Buddhist refuge. You might seek other kinds of refuge. Or let's say, even if you have faith in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, unless you have a fear, I mentioned this in the discussion the other day, unless you have some fear, you're not actually going to seek refuge. So fear is something that's very, very important, as you say. But once you have fear, you need to have some kind of confidence, at least hope at the beginning. Some of the Buddhist texts that talk about refuge say at the very beginning, what you need at least is fear and hope. Yes, the Buddha Dharma is saying it. Pardon? Fear. Yeah, right. They're opposites. It's the same as fear and faith are opposites. But until you have, you may not have faith in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha right at the beginning. Like when you first go to church or something and someone says, accept Jesus in your heart, and you're hoping this will work. How can you know at the beginning? How can you have real faith unless you have some strong, your brothers and sisters are all altar boys or altar girls, altar persons. I mean, there can be reasons where you have faith, like people that grow up in Buddhist countries. They many times they think they are Buddhist because they have faith, but they may not have this sense of a real sense of fear of cyclic existence, fear of the future lives. So even though they might think they have faith in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, it doesn't really become the full cause of refuge. You need both fear, and I think this is what Midian was talking about, the various kinds of fear. Fear of not just the suffering of this lifetime, but fear at least of the suffering of the lives coming after this, the next life, the fear of suffering in the lower realms. And then on a later stage, when you understand that even if you were to be born as a human again or as a god or whatever, that life would finish, fear of all of cyclic existence. And then the fear that Rinpoche mentioned, the fear of the peace of nirvana. Did you catch that? So you might have, did you ever hear that before? You did. Okay, good. Where did you hear? So we talked. We may have mentioned it in some of our courses. It comes in the Prajnaparamita Sutras when it talks about the Bodhisattvas. It says they overcome samsara with wisdom, and the fears of samsara with wisdom, and the fear of nirvana, means the peace of nirvana, with compassion. So what does that mean? They overcome? Because actually, if you think about it, before you actually were getting too self-centered, if you were to think in a sober moment, you thought, boy, if I just let myself go and just think of myself, I would be abandoning all of these other people that I could be helping. So there's a certain preoccupation, a fear of falling into that sort of sense of self-interest, nirvana. If you enter into nirvana, if you actually achieved nirvana from the point of view of the Hinayana path, you will remain in that state for a very long period of time. That state is brought about by an intense sense of renunciation of samsara, practicing the 3 higher trainings, and wanting to get out of cyclic existence. And so once you get to that point, there's no turning back. That's why it's only at a certain point on the training that someone who's entering into the Hinayana path may be able to, stop that and enter into the Mahayana path. In general, if you've entered into the Hinayana path without developing compassion, that can be a sort of a long period of time before you'll attain enlightenment, because you will, if you are someone who actually achieves nirvana, you will remain in that state for a long period of time. It's not as though you enter into nirvana and then you think, well, maybe now I should work for and develop compassion for sentient beings. There's not that motivation at that point. I might have mentioned my friend in India, the Maharaja of Kashmir, Dr. Karan Singh, when we would meditate on compassion sometime, and afterwards he would look a little irritated. I'd ask him what was wrong, and he said, well, I don't like to meditate on this. He said, I'd like to have the choice that at the time of dying, I will decide whether to achieve liberation or to come back. I'll decide then. If you don't cultivate compassion, it's not going to arise in your mind at that point. When given the choice of coming back and working for sentient beings, or achieving whatever is called moksha, maybe they don't use the word nirvana so much you might find in some Hindu scriptures or Vedic scriptures. Mainly you talk about moksha, liberation. Mainly you want to achieve that moksha. So we do talk about that in there's some verses in the Prajnaparamita, overcoming samsara with wisdom. So wisdom is what the Bodhisattvas use. The wisdom of emptiness is what protects them from samsara, overcomes samsara. And compassion is what helps them to overcome the fears of nirvana, because through compassion, they don't enter into striving to achieve nirvana just for their own sake. They work to eliminate the afflictions, but for the benefit of sentient beings. Okay. So, the causes of refuge, we just talked about the causes. What are the causes of refuge? Did you?
Fear and faith.
Fear and faith. Okay. Based on that, the objects to whom or to which you go for refuge? You say which, I guess, huh? What are the objects that you...
It sounds like refuge is an emotional state, then.
Refuge is an emotional
Rather
state?
than a rational or mental state or a logical state. If you're basing it on fear and faith, that sounds like a very emotional state. I'm scared to death of whatever's coming at me in the future, I'm just terrified.
Scared to death?
And I have faith, and then maybe later I have faith that it appears these guys are talking about. I'll have faith that I'll go down that road over there. It looks safe.
Is that faith? Looks safe. I'll go down that road. Well, no, I was just mentioning in some texts that talk about refuge, it says at the very beginning, at least you need hope. But that has to, for real refuge, it has to be faith. Faith that Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha can actually protect you.
Fear is an emotional state. It's not a rational state.
Fear can be very rational. For instance, if you, I've mentioned this many times. Say, for instance, if you have a fire, or let's say, a cliff. If you have you look and you say, "Whoa! If I'm just casual walking there, I can die." And you're cautious because of that, because of knowing the consequences. You're cautious not to contravene that border. That's not necessarily a debilitating. Another kind of person in fear, oh, there's a cliff. There's different kinds of fear. There's an emotional fear, but here it's not an emotional fear which is one in which you are incapacitated to act. It's a fear that's based on wisdom. Okay, and fear actually, we know in our own lifetime. Your parents told you unless you get an education, you won't get a job. You'll be a bum. Do they still use that word? What? You with your voice? You'll be a bum. You won't get married. You won't be a monk or whatever you say to them. We never want to see you. We will disown you. You won't get the inheritance. So there's some fear, and so then it depends on how much an emotional factor there is, but it can be a wisdom, and that's what's being talked about here, wisdom fear. So having developed that fear, then recognizing the objects to which you go for refuge, identifying the objects to which you go for refuge, the reasons why they are worthy of refuge. So I have a question for you. Diana, Miss Diana, what's your last name? Whittingham. It mentions what are the reasons why Buddha is a suitable object of refuge? Gotta ask a star student.
Who hasn't had time to study lately? Off the top of my head, the two things that are coming to me are just that the Buddha has abandoned all obscurations and he's attained all qualities.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing I can think of right now.
So let's see, what if I said some things? The Buddha has compassion for all beings and equanimity. Those are two of the factors. That is, if someone, whether someone were, praising them or rubbing sandalwood paste on one part of their body and someone on the other side is cutting them with a knife. Usually, I mentioned this before, usually we don't rub sandalwood paste on someone in the West as a sign of honor, but that's kind of like, something considered at that time that's considered something very, very nice. Getting a massage. Someone's giving you a massage, not a Thai, not one of these, what are those really wrathful ones? Not one of those, but some really nice massage with some oil on one side. The other person has got a razor and they're cutting you and putting in sand and stuff in your wounds, salt. The Buddha would have equal compassion for both of them. Now, in that context, do you remember what these are? Who knows? The four, yeah.
There's the compassion. He's pleased by offerings.
He's pleased by offerings.
Yeah. Not by material offerings, but by offerings of practice. I'm sorry, pleased by offerings of practice.
So this is one of the qualities of Buddha that makes him a perfect refuge, that he's pleased by offerings.
No. Offerings of practice.
No, it's not the quality of Buddha.
Fourth, he is pleased, not by material offerings, but by offerings of practice.
Look at the outline here. The causes of going for refuge. The reason why they are worthy to be refuge on page 179. There are 4 reasons why a Buddha is worthy to be a refuge. First, he has mastered himself and attained the sublime state of fearlessness. In other words, he has no fears himself. Okay? If he had not attained this, he would not be able to protect others from all fears, just as a person who has already fallen down cannot help someone else who has fallen down. Second, he is always skilled in the means of training disciples. So he's fearless. We talk about the 4 fearlessnesses and so forth. Second, he is always skilled. He is in all ways, not always, and always skilled in the means of training disciples in every possible way. If this were not so, he would not be able to fulfill your needs, even if you went to him for refuge. So in other words, maybe people that had some particular, disability he could help, but for you, he's saying, well, I can't help you. He can help everyone, every person. Third, he has great compassion. If he did not have it, he would not be able to protect you. If you went to him for refuge, he would not protect you if he didn't have great protection. Is that someone who has great knowledge and so forth, like a scholar or something today, or someone very powerful, if they didn't have compassion, even if you went to them for help, if they had the ability to help, unless they had compassion, they would not be motivated to help. And fourth, he is pleased, he is pleased not by material offerings, but by offerings of practice. If this were not so, he would act. If he were not, he would not act as a refuge for everyone, but would help only those who had previously helped him. So this is, so we have to eat my words, okay?
Fair and balanced.
Okay, fair and balanced. So what am I thinking of? Only one who is free of all fears, who is skilled in the means of freeing others from fear, who has great impartial compassion for everyone. So this is the one that I'm thinking of. I was dividing into two. And who acts for everyone's welfare regardless of whether or not they have benefited him. That's the main part here, whether they have benefited him or not. Here, I'm not sure this is translated exactly. He is pleased not by material offerings, but by offerings of practice. If they were not so, he would not act as a refuge for everyone, but would help only those who had previously helped him. It doesn't mean that this quality is not stated generally that, I think this sentence is translated backwards, is not that the quality is that he is pleased by practice. The quality is he doesn't require, he's not pleased by people who make material offering or homage to him as a basis for his help. Oftentimes in the world, if you go to someone, unless you make an offering or praise to them, they're not going to help you. The Buddha is not that way. It's totally impartial. Whether you've even criticized the Buddha will help. You might think, well, doesn't the Buddhist path say that you have to, praise the Buddha and all of these things? This is creating karmic causes for the Buddha's help to be able to be accepted by you, for that you have the karma. But from the Buddhist side, it's not the Buddha saying, well, those people, they don't like me. They don't follow our teachings. I'm not going to help them. They can go wherever that place. Okay. So my question, those are the qualities. So what are they again? What are these four qualities? Fearlessness, skill, compassion, and impartiality. Okay. So those are the qualities necessary for worthy refuge, right? Why the Buddha is a worthy refuge. So does that mean the three jewels have these qualities? That's my question for Diana Whittingham. That's what the question was getting at. I thought you would know the four qualities. Okay.
So what's this?
Maybe ask Luis. Okay, so these are four qualities that make the Buddha a worthy refuge, right, Venerable? Fearlessness, totally free out of samsara, has no fears of samsara because he's escaped from samsara, has perfect skill, knows the means and the inclinations of sentient beings. All of these can be elaborated in great detail. Has great compassion, so it's not as though he would ignore some sentient beings, and doesn't require that, he's totally impartial whether you're praising him or cutting him and so forth. Now, does the Dharma and the Sangha have those qualities also? That's what I'm asking. So, because it said the Buddha is a suitable refuge because he has these qualities. Supposedly, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are all suitable objects of refuge.
Well, the Buddha would be, obviously. The Sangha should be.
What do you think, Kelton?
And the Dharma is the teaching, yes.
those qualities.
So are the Arya Sangha is actual refuge, right? So Hinayana Arhats are actual refuge. Do they have great compassion? Do they have impartiality? Do they have perfect skill? They're free of all the fears of samsara, but maybe not all they're not free of the fears of nirvana. It's hard to say they even have any of those qualities. So does that mean they're not suitable objects of refuge?
I don't know.
So this was started out by saying in the section, this is the reason why Buddha is a worthy object of refuge. Was it? Was it? You're just telling jokes, or you're saying?
I think the Dharma comes out of the Buddha, is caused by the Buddha, comes from the Buddha, and the Sangha comes from the Dharma, who makes them all suitable refuges.
Okay, but these four qualities are not necessarily qualities that the Dharma and the Sangha themselves embody. That's what I'm asking. It's just the Buddha that has these qualities. What does it say? On the end of the first paragraph on page 180, it says, therefore, his teachings, this is how they translate Dharma all the time here. I would make it more clear to me if they just said Dharma. The Dharma and the Sangha of his disciples are also worthy of being a refuge. Since only the Buddha has these qualities and the divine creator and so on do not, the divine creator, this is kind of using the terminology that was prevalent in some of the Vedic schools, some kind of creator God, or as we would say in Christianity also. He alone is the refuge. Does God have impartiality according to the Bible? Who's the biblical? Oh, Jesse, you said you were well scholared in it.
Yes.
But he loves all.
Loves all equally.
But why does he send some to hell forever? Is he impartial? Is he? If you were,
He set some rules and he's got to stick to them now.
sounds a little bit like George Bush to me.
Not like dogma to me.
Once he's said it, it's right, and he's got to. I won't go there anymore. I should forget it. I just get myself in deep doo-doo here.
Compassion.
Yeah.
What's the difference? Compassion's got to be impartial.
Can you be impartial and not compassionate? Yeah, you could be equally distasteful, or you could just
I think everybody's a jerk.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. You could be impartial without being compassionate. So, yes.
There's a leap here. It says, since only the Buddha has these qualities and the divine creator and so on do not, he alone is the refuge. Therefore, his teaching and the community of his disciples are also worthy of being
Very
a
good.
refuge.
Very good observation. This is what I was hoping someone would have noticed. So what does Geshe Zopa's commentary mention at that point? Does he make any clarification? Because in things like this, sometimes there are things that were mistranslated, sometimes just one word. Where's the section? Where's that section in Geshe Zopa's book? Causes of going for refuge. Based on that, the objects are going to identifying the objects of refuge, the reasons why they are worthy of refuge. There are 4 reasons why the Buddhas are worthy of being the highest refuge. So this goes on for a couple of pages. Let's see. 403 on to about 408. So on 407, let's see. Let's look on the bottom of 407, the last paragraph. So although the necessary outside conditions were put in place by the Buddha, the qualities needed from our side are not complete. These inner conditions are the fear that motivates you to seek refuge and confidence, and confidence or faith in the power of the refuge objects to protect you. In order to produce these two, you have to analyze the problems and then check your conclusions against your own experience and meditation. Let's see, Buddhist. 408, because a Buddhist is defined by taking refuge in the three jewels, the answer to the question, am I a Buddhist, is based on whether or not you have taken refuge. There's no external sign making someone who has entered the Buddhist path, marking someone who has entered the Buddhist path. It has nothing to do with wearing monk's robes or so forth. So does it mention why the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha? Here's as Leo pointed out, therefore his teaching, the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma and the Sangha are also worthy of being refuge. Is it any mention of that here?
On 405,
Uh-huh.
second paragraph, sort of alludes to it.
Therefore, the Compendium of Determinations by Sangha teaches that once you are certain that the Buddha has these four qualities, you should single-pointedly rely on the three jewels of refuge. The important point here is to be confident. The way you become convinced is to investigate and examine these things. When you are sure that something is the only true source of protection, you will go in only one direction, toward relying on that object.
Previous paragraph.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Those four perfect qualities are only found in the Buddha. This is in the paragraph before that on page 405. Because only he has all these good qualities, only he is fit to be a refuge. So that would sound like not the Dharma and the Sangha, right? And those very qualities make his teachings and the disciples who correctly practice his instructions worthy to take as refuges also. The Buddha is the perfect doctor, and his medicine is the Dharma. The nurses who take the prescription themselves and care for other patients by helping them to follow the therapy are the Sangha. Since the medicine and the nurses are direct products of the highest doctor, they too are worthy objects of refuge. So that clarifies a bit. And this is on page 405. So sometimes some of these statements that Lama Tsong Khapa makes, they have to be investigated. And that's why the great scholars wrote commentaries to. There's a famous text called the Four, I think sometimes translated the Four Interwoven Commentaries, or the Four. It's called Chembu Shi. The four. Chembu means notes. Four great lamas who had written notes and sort of like commentary interspersed in various places of the Lam Rim Chenmo, and all of them were put into one text. So it has all the Lam Rim Chenmo like this, as though you were writing notes in between with little dots, saying what this means is this. So there are notes by those lamas. That has not been translated into English, so maybe that's for, Diana or, or Venerable to translate sometime in the future. Those four commentaries. Okay, so that helps a little bit to understand, although these four qualities of the Buddha, what are they? What are the four qualities? What are the Buddha's program? Fearlessness, skill, compassion, and impartiality. So that's useful to think of, and as the kind of the point that Pat was reading before about the Buddha's not pleased by material offerings. Of course, the Buddha's, it doesn't mean the Buddha's displeased by material offerings. It's not as though, some people like to your local politician is only going to be pleased by if you bring something, a big sack of goodies or something like that, right? Or praise or something like that. The Buddha's totally impartial whether people praise like that or not. That's the point.
The motivation is he would be looking at.
Even that doesn't. The Buddhist doesn't even care if you're practicing.
Oh, okay.
That's why I was saying the emphasis was someone like he's sort of this. It sounded like he's he's a little partial if you're practicing, and you're not practicing, he's not. It's from his side, whether you're practicing Buddhism, whether you're a complete doofus. Is that a legitimate word? That's a word? Whether you're practicing or not practicing, whether you're doing bad things, the Buddha is totally impartial and compassionate. But from your side, remember what Geshe-la said, and as we understand, the Buddha has these incredible powers and ability and knowledge to help, directly and indirectly, but it depends on your side also. Like the Buddha's putting this rope down and you've fallen into this big hole. The Buddha's lowering a rope. From your side, it's a perfect way to get out. But from your side, unless you grab that, unless you have faith in that and grab that and hold on and persevere, it's not going to make any difference. So it's a cooperative kind of thing, the taking of refuge. That's why take refuge is important. You having that crack of faith in your my otherwise solid rock-like mind, letting in, being receptive to it. It's not as though your lack of faith prevents the Buddha from entering in. The Buddha's mind is not obstructed by anything, right? The enlightened activity. But from the side of the receptivity, if you're not aware of and receptive to and confident of, you're not going to take. Even the Buddhists propose teachings and practices for you. If you don't have any faith in them, oh yeah, well, forget that. That's just hard work. You think, reciting all these things and doing that, bending down. I don't want to bend down. Just got arthritis. Okay. So the qualities. So identifying, based on that, the objects to which you take refuge, identifying the objects to which you go for refuge, the reasons why they're worthy, the way you go for refuge. Going for refuge by knowing the good qualities. We talked a lot about that. So this involves, because at first you don't know these qualities. Someone just enumerates them, so you can kind of marvel at them, but you might be quite dubious about the qualities. Buddha has this body that is emanation of his mind, and all these signs on it, and hair curls that go out all this distance, and you can't see the top of his. It just sounds like it could be anyone's fairy tale, right? So these kinds of qualities of the Buddha's body and speech and mind are things that you start to see emulation of in great beings. And then you can start to, as you make realizations along the path, then you can, I believe, you can develop more faith in those. But at the beginning, I'm not quite sure if they would motivate a skeptic. You know what I mean? Like the Western skeptical mind, just saying the Buddha has these qualities. You could say anything. So there's no, those qualities have come about because of, if you investigate how those qualities came about, because of the accumulation of merit over a great period of time, 3 countless great eons, motivated out of bodhicitta, out of great compassion for sentient beings. Then it starts to make sense. And through your practice, you can start to appreciate these qualities over time. This is my kind of feeling about that. So, but we do talk about it's good to know the qualities of the Buddha's body, his speech. Remember the quality of one utterance of the Buddha answering the worries, the questions of all living beings in their own language. The good qualities of the Buddha's mind, the good qualities of his knowledge, the good qualities of caring. Here the word is tsewa, I think, caring. Maybe we would say mercy, or it's a word that means, essentially, compassion. Does the Buddha have compassion? I'll ask Diana again, because I haven't asked her questions a lot lately. Does the Buddha have compassion?
Yes.
Isn't compassion a mental factor? Buddha could have mental factors, right? Secondary minds. Does the Buddha have any conceptual thought? Isn't compassion a conceptual mind? You see the wheels turning. Is it? Spontaneous compassion. I've never heard of spontaneous.
Like spontaneous bodhicitta.
Spontaneous bodhicitta means without effort, yeah. But if you mean in that sense, but that even a bodhisattva has spontaneous bodhicitta can still be conceptual. Bodhisattva has to have the thought to achieve enlightenment. It has to be accompanied by that wish to attain enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. So it still would be. The bodhicitta itself is a primary mind, right? But it has to be accompanied by that aspiration to achieve enlightenment for the welfare of sentient beings. So there are some conceptual components, although bodhicitta itself is non-conceptual. But is the Buddha's compassion conceptual? No, it can't be, because Buddha has no conceptual mind at all. So maybe that's one reason. I don't know. Sometimes when we talk about the Buddha, we do say Tukche Chempo, we do say Maha Karuna, and like in the mantras of Chenrei, say Maha Karuna Kaya and things like that. But maybe this other word, mercy, is used in some cases. Here they call it caring. Caring, I don't know, that doesn't have the same sense for me. So the qualities of, in other words, of wisdom and compassion, those are the qualities of the Buddha's mind. And then the good qualities of enlightened activity. Sometimes we talk about the qualities of wisdom, compassion, and power. But the power, in this case, is kind of like the qualities of enlightened activities. And then the qualities of the Dharma. What are the qualities of the Dharma? Just very briefly. We just have a minute or two more. Why is the Dharma worthy of refuge? Remember? Take a look quickly. Dharma. What was the quality of Dharma that it was talking about? Which is? 186, right? 187, right? Once you've made respect for the Buddha as your primary cause, you should then recollect the teaching jewel, the Dharma jewel, as follows. The Buddha possesses limitless good qualities, all of which arose from meditating on and realizing both the verbal teachings and the realizational teachings. That is, he actualized the true cessations, thereby eliminating faults, and meditated on the true paths, thereby giving rise to good qualities. So if you know what the Dharma jewel is from studying this and the Uttara Tantra, the actual Dharma jewel that we take refuge in, precious jewel, is true path and true cessations, right? And then knowing the good qualities of the Sangha. So this is all we have time for right now, but I would urge you, when you have a chance like this to hear teachings like this, to spend a little time in reviewing, going back and trying to, again, get a general perspective, get the outline, see everything in perspective, and then you will be able to, I think things will fit together more realistically for your own practice. Let's do the meditation and dedication as a end here. So think whatever merits I've created tonight and in this course with the great Choden Rinpoche, whatever merits I've created in the past or I will create in the future, when you dedicate, you can dedicate not just the merits right now, but all the merits that you have created that have not yet ripened, and all the merits that you will create. Due to these merits, may I quickly develop the realizations of the stages of the path, put them into practice, achieve enlightenment, where I have fulfilled both my own purpose of eternal bliss, stable, everlasting, blissful happiness, and am motivated solely out of compassion to bring about that same state for all sentient beings. And then seal that dedication in an understanding of the emptiness of the three spheres, the merits, the goals dedicated to, and the act of dedication are all empty of true existence, merely imputed